Williams, Dr. Bagley, Ms. Linda. Ms. Jasmine is joining us virtually via Zoom, so we appreciate her being here. And we do not have any members of the public. We do have a couple of other board members who are just sitting and observing. So we'll just go ahead and jump in and get started. The first policy is item 1.02, policy GCEC, posting and advertising of professional vacancies. Committee members, you should have the original policy that has no markups on it at all. And then you should have a second version of that same policy that has some yellow highlighting and some red. And Ms. Jasmine, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the recommendations from you guys. Is that correct?
It is. It's just, I would just say proposed, Gary. It's proposed options
Sure.
That we wanted to present for further discussion and consideration by the administration and by the policy committee, so that you could talk about, maybe which language might best suit the district's needs.
Sure. Okay, so Superintendent Williams, I will be more than happy to defer to you first, and then we'll go from there.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Irwin. So basically, this policy, the revisions that have been made to the policy just adds more specificity to the policy. And what I really like is I would really like for the board to just kind of look at this policy. Let's talk and just have some discussions about things that you like about what has been added, things that you may not like about what has been added, and then the administration would like to have more time to come back together, taking your feedback into consideration to maybe revise it even more. But I will let you know some of the main changes. If you look down at the part that's highlighted in yellow, this part just says that the board declares its support of a policy that gives teachers and administrators from its present staff consideration with respect to filling of promotional vacancies. And those vacancies are vacancies such as principal or assistant principal, or directors or coordinators, any position that would promote an existing staff to another position. Now, this is not saying that we will not give consideration to external candidates, because we will. Internal and external candidates are considered. But looking at the language of other districts in our state, our legal counsel was able to draft and just put some things in for your consideration. That's one of the recommendations that is in this policy. And if you look at the second page, there are exceptions for posting job vacancies. And those exceptions are listed as bullets. There are 4 bullets on the second page as exceptions for posting vacancies. And if you want to talk about the ones that are listed here, or if we want to add any other exceptions, or if you just want to leave it as a broad statement that the administration has the ability to determine, if there will be an exception to posting a position. And then the last, if you look at the second page, you'll see highlighted in yellow. It says the administration will generally advertise all administrative and supervisory job vacancies within the district unless otherwise determined by the superintendent or his or her designee upon the district's needs. No promotional vacancy will be filled unless it has been posted for at least 3 school days unless the superintendent authorizes the placement based on the needs of the district. So basically this statement is just giving the administration some flexibility based upon the needs of the district. So if we want to just kind of look at the policy, just kind of talk a little bit about what you like, what you do not like, what we can consider to add or take out or revise, that would be good at this time.
Okay, let me just start, Superintendent Williams, at the bottom of page 1 in the highlighted yellow section, where we were talking about support of a policy to give teachers and administrators from the present staff consideration. We have no qualifying word in front of consideration. So we're not saying that they're going to have an advantage, that they're going to be seen as better. All it says is the board supports the possibility of internal candidates.
That's
right.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. I do have another question, but committee members Nixon and Cunningham, I will give you the floor if you guys have any questions or comments for what Superintendent Williams
I wish there was a comma after administrators and after staff.
Highlighted part.
Right.
Well, we can definitely do comments. We can do that.
Yes.
Because that way you have the qualifier. The administrators and teachers from the present.
Right. Okay.
Give them consideration.
Mr. Nixon, anything else?
I don't see anything else.
Mr. Cunningham, anything?
I was with Nixon.
Okay. Okay.
If you want to take a moment to look at those exceptions.
I did look at those and I saw that you have in brackets there. Are there any other exceptions which may apply? I'm trying to think of the exceptions that should be there.
Ms. Jasmine, as we're kind of looking at this and just kind of perusing over it, is there anything else that you have to add other than what we've already got presented?
No, and again, there's just, it's options for the board to consider, particularly towards the end of the policy. You could either, because I think, the main thing is just to make it clear that there may be very rare circumstances in which a position may be filled without it being advertised, and you could have the ability to specify, when those rare occasions would be, so that, it's very clear the rationale behind the lack of a posting, or you could have the more general language as an alternative, which is highlighted below if you didn't want to identify. And these are just some circumstances or situations that we see where it might warrant filling a vacancy without it being advertised or posted. There might be some benefit to, again, going back and consulting with human resources to see, based on experiences, if there's any. If you decide to go with the option of identifying those particular instances in which there would not be a posting, consulting with human resources further just to see if anything is missing. I did have a chance to consult with HR initially and got some feedback, but I probably would suggest, and I think Superintendent Williams was going to do the same, and reaching back out to human resources to see if there's anything else, any other scenarios that should be identified if you do decide to list the rare occasions in which a vacancy would not be posted. Or again, you could use the more broad language, which would encompass, various instances without having to identify every particular scenario.
I think addressing this in specific language would be more beneficial, instead of leaving it as a broad category. That way, there's no confusion about the exceptions. I do know that we do have a representative from Human Resources here, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but Ms. Stevens, I don't know if you have policy in hand. I'd like you to look at those exceptions that are listed at the top of page 2, and from your experience in human resources, if there's any other exceptions that you can think of that need to be added.
I do have a question. I'm looking over both page. Once we post the job advertising, do we have a set time when it's going to take it down after a period of time?
So it has to be advertised for at least 3 days.
I didn't see any investment. something that we don't have to post.
It is in there somewhere, Mr. Cunningham, we gotta remember where it is.
I was looking,
The bottom highlighted paragraph on page 2, that highlighted section says for at least 3 school days.
oh, okay, I see now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, I think I prefer the more specific bullets because, and the second one that says, the existence of a pressing condition requiring vacancy to be filled expediently. If someone, I always used to tell people, and when I was teaching, if I, died in a car accident, they needed somebody there tomorrow, right? So that to me is that expediency that that I can appreciate the superintendent having the authority to do that.
My concern, so I come from the technology side of education, right? And whenever you're preparing a classroom for technology use, where to put the smart board, where to put the Ethernet connections, all those things, you learn in technology that you have to base everything on the room and not the teacher. So whenever you go from year to year, if you have a different teacher in that room, you can't go and change all of those connections and all of those placements just because a new teacher come in. It has to be set for the room. The reason why I say that is because the comment that I'm fixing to make has nothing to do with our current superintendent. However, this policy being in place, if we have another superintendent years down the line that comes in, this same policy as it's going to be written now will still exist. And our district has had issues as far as public perception in the immediate past and even still now with transparency. And so the language where it says will generally advertise does give exceptions where you could fill a position without it being advertised. And my concern is for that transparency piece, because even before I was a board member, that's something that has been a criticism of our board and our district as a whole. So I'm just a little bit concerned, and I understand that there has to be times where it can be done, like the example you gave. But I really like Ms. Jasmine's words as far as it being rare and not, something like that. If we have a position that's not posted, that needs to be the rare exception. And at no time does that never need to be commonplace. And so the reason I said what I said about the superintendent, let's say, years down the road, we get a different superintendent who doesn't like the board's input or the board's opinion, or doesn't like the person who's running HR or whatever, and so they decide, oh, well, this is a good time for me just to fill this position. I just think we need to be very careful in the wording of it to make sure that we don't allow those situations where we could bypass the posting of a position, if that makes sense. And I don't know, Ms. Jasmine, if that's as simple as maybe where we have generally, if maybe we can put in, rare or something to that, just so we can have specific language in there that says this should not be just a whim, right? It should, unless there are significant reasons, like Mr. Nixon said, that are explicitly spelled out, we need to make sure that we're posting these positions.
Well, and I certainly understand, your point with that, Mr. Irwin. I think what I would say is, that word generally is listed not to give the ability to just arbitrarily depart from the rule, but to compensate in the event there is a particular rare scenario that's not listed. That all of the great minds that are in this room right now are not thinking about that way. The district has flexibility in another rare circumstances that's not listed in order to be able to act accordingly. scenarios do not capture everything, that there's still flexibility, in case, there needed to be a departure from, for whatever reason.
Right.
So, sometimes it's helpful to have that language so you're not limited. Again, I don't think it would lend itself towards abusing this rule or for someone to come in and arbitrarily, decide to depart from the requirement of posting, but you might also want language in there that does allow you that flexibility in another rare circumstance that might not be expressly identified. If that makes sense, but, whatever, the pleasure is of the administration of the board, we're happy to modify, accordingly. But I just wanted to kind of explain, with that term generally, the benefits to having it in there, or if we take it out, we might need to add, some other language that would, allow, another scenario in case it's not identified.
And that paragraph is one that would be used if we opt not to use the specific bullets that you listed prior to that, because as I see it, it says alternative to specifying exceptions.
I think that's for the following paragraph.
Yeah, the term generally is, I think, what Mr. Earl was saying is even with
So this one.
the language, you use the provision
Right.
where you said the district generally will advertise all job vacancies within the district unless otherwise determined by the superintendent or his or her designate under the exceptions below. I think that's what Mr. Earl was referring to. That term
Yes.
generally is still in there, which, could lead to, there being another scenario that's not identified.
I
But
just,
you can say the district will advertise all job vacancies within the district unless it fits into one of these exceptions below.
well, I completely understand the need for generally. I completely understand, because we're there, as sure enough, as soon as we list, even if we list 20 exceptions,
Yes.
number 21 is going to come up. So I understand the need to have the word generally. I want to make sure, and again, the board members who are here now, the superintendent here now, is not my concern or my worry. My concern is future board members, future superintendents. Can that word generally be interpreted as a way to let me skirt by you? Does that make sense? So, I mean.
I understand, just to make sure that it's not interpreted in a way that
Sure.
can be arbitrarily
Right.
applied or abused
Right.
to circumvent.
Sure enough, no matter how many exemptions we put, there's going to come up one that we're not thinking of, and then that's going to create a problem. So I want us to have that flexibility and that leeway, but I just want to make sure that it is, kind of made clear that is a rare exception and not the general rule.
Okay.
Mr. Nixon, Mr. Cunningham, anything else?
Nothing else on this?
Okay, so where are we leaning currently? Are we leaning towards the first red paragraph at the bottom of page 1 and then listing the exceptions? Or are we more leaning towards getting rid of that and using that highlighted paragraph that's on the middle of page 2?
But now the problem with that is the statement on page 1 says the district generally will advertise all job vacancies, whereas on page 2, administration will generally advertise all administrative and supervisory job vacancies. So that doesn't include all job vacancies.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
So we would need to go, and we can make that
Just,
consistent.
that's, I think that would be it. It would just be advertise all jobs or whatever. But, so, Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Nixon, what are y'all's thoughts? Do you like the more general overarching statement in the middle of page 2, or do you like the expressed exceptions in bullet points?
Administrative general.
I think if we said the administration will generally advertise all job vacancies, then including administrative and supervisory, vacancies within the district. That way, you put all jobs as well as them understanding you're looking at the top jobs as well. That way, it's all covered.
Sure.
Okay.
And so again, are the two of you saying that you're more in favor of the general paragraph as opposed to the bulleted exceptions?
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Okay. Superintendent Williams, do you have a preference one way or the other as far as the general or the specified?
Well, as I was listening to the conversation, if we go with the specified, like you said, we list 20, there'll be 20.
Of course.
So the general statement pretty much encompasses everything because it's based upon the needs of the district.
Okay.
So before this conversation, I was more in favor of listening. But I think just listening to the conversation, I think it would be more expedient to just use that general statement because it's all based on the needs of the district.
Okay.
That eliminated anything that pops up, where you cover all your bases.
And Ms. Jasmine, just from a legal point, we say that it has to be listed at least 3 school days. Do we need to do anything as far as specifying, like Mr. Cunningham brought up, an ending time for any of these, like shall not be posted for longer, or we leave that open-ended just depending on how many applications we get, those kind of things?
No, I think it's best, that 3 days, as a minimum. But my understanding, maybe somebody from HR could better address this, but with the particular postings, there might be a deadline as to how long. There might be some jobs that it's specified, for 14 days. I'm just throwing that number out there, but I don't know if that is usually how every job vacancy is posted, where yes, the understanding is going to be posted for at least 3 days, but there might be some positions where the decision is made, we're going to, at a minimum, it's going to be 10 days or 14 days. And you could certainly do that, but I don't think in policy you would want to limit yourself to having a particular time other than those 3 days. Just saying, we'll at least post it for 3 days, but I don't know if you would want to put any other limitations on that.
Again, my thought on that is just simply the transparency and the public perception. They posted Mr. Nixon's job for 3 days and they took it down. They posted Mr. Cunningham's job for 21 days and it's still up. They must already knew who they wanted for Mr. Nixon's, but they didn't find anybody for Mr. Cunningham. Do you know what I mean? I just want to make sure that we can, those public perceptions, if one job is taken down after the minimum 3 days, but another one is left up for 3 weeks, just kind of the public perception, because we do, Ms. Jasmine, and I'm sure you don't have this in any other district you work in, we do have people who watch our job posting boards just so they can come up with conspiracy theories about who got picked and who got selected and why. So just from the transparency part of it, I just want to, I didn't know if there needed to be some kind of standard norm, and I don't know, maybe there is in HR, maybe we.
Well, Ms. Stevens might be able to speak to this, but I do.
I think a lot of it might be just driven by, your needs when you get, and maybe you do have sufficient applicant pool to proceed with your interviews and going ahead and filling the position, or maybe other times the applicant pool is not, it doesn't meet the expectations, so you need more time to allow people to submit positions. It might just depend on the need, is this a job where you need somebody to start immediately, or, is this in the middle of the, particular season when you have time to wait and
Right.
you can advertise for the position longer. I think it might depend on facts and circumstances, but I have not seen in any other policies, not that I've seen everybody's policies, but typically there is nothing in policy that would be more than those 3 days.
Okay.
But internally, you might have some, maybe procedures where the standard is maybe 7 or 10 days, but I don't know if I would necessarily recommend putting that in a policy where you're something
Ms.
that
Wade?
you
That's
understand.
basically what I was going to express, that sometimes with some jobs, you may have, more applicants than you know, really need, but then some, you may not have enough applicants. You know, so it really just depends upon the particular job and the amount of applications that you have coming in that determines how long you're going to be that posted up. If you didn't get enough applicants, you can leave it up for a little longer. But if you receive an overwhelming amount, you might take it down a little earlier. So it just depends upon the single.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we have the hiring manager contact us and say they have enough for the seven pool applicants, so they don't need more, so they ask us to take out.
And I guess my question was gonna be, wouldn't you need the posting up until a suitable applicant?
It is.
It's fine, yeah. So, 3 days, 3 weeks, a month.
The vacancy was in group until we receive the recommendation.
My recommendation, Mr. Chairman, Madam Superintendent, I look at, I guess, 3 days, I think it should be a little longer than 3 days. I think 5 days, give people time, and then being transparent with people out there in the community, they have that opportunity. Because some people can't get a resume together in 3 days. You know, sometimes it'll take them a little longer, and they got to do some background, make sure that's the job they are applying for. That's just my belief, Jasmine, that I think this 5 days should be a good number instead of 3 days. And that's just me. I know you said that earlier that most people do 3 days, but I think 5 days, that'll give them a little more time to get their application together and their resume.
Yeah, I mean, legally, there's nothing that would prohibit you from going beyond, those 3 days. It would just be, an administrative and board decision. But, you'd also need to recognize too, the implications that might have, and HR might have, some feedback on that. But, certainly legally, there's nothing that would prevent you from, extending that amount of time. If that's something that the district wanted to do and felt that it was in the best interest, from an administrative standpoint.
I guess, Mr. Cunningham, I guess my only thought with that would be, if you change that to 5 days, let's say the job is posted on a Monday, it says school days, so then you go from 5 days to 7 days, because you have to factor in the weekend, because, you know what I mean? So if we have a position, let's say, I don't know, Ms. Jessica, what position we can use, but Mr. Nixon, heaven forbid, died, and we had to replace him, that 3 days, you posted on a Monday, you could hire somebody potentially on Thursday, whereas if you do it on the 5 days, you wouldn't be able to hire them until the following Monday. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes a difference, but.
5 days, you're talking about 5 school days, and say Monday, starting Monday, by Friday, everybody should have their application in. First, beginning of next week, you can start looking at your application, see what you have,
Right.
and go from there. But the weekend, you'll count weekends.
All right.
Ms. Stevens, do you know of any instances where, an advertisement has been taken down after the days? Because I think it's generally,
It depends on the hiring manager. We had a position at Bellevue that was taken out, and she received 16 applicants. But never reported to the judge.
Just for clarification, whenever you are referring to the hiring manager, is that someone within our district?
Oh, yeah, that's his bills and then the principal bills.
I got you. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to clarify we weren't talking about like an outside agency or something. I got you. Okay. All right. Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Nixon, anything else on this policy, GCEC? Superintendent Williams, anything else?
no, sir, I think we have enough information that we can go back now and have a conversation with people to make
Okay.
sure that we revise it based upon the feedback.
Dr. Bagley, I would be remiss, since we have your expertise sitting at the table, if we didn't at least offer for your input. Is there anything else you would add to this?
There's only two things I would add. In the past, we have also said until filled.
Okay.
We have advertised the position until filled, letting people know that we're waiting for applications and submission. And the other, I've really never seen posted more than 3 days. I've usually seen that as the general rule. Of course, it's always up for discussion. Reports are very well made. But that's the only two, is that sometimes you give yourself a little leeway by saying until filled.
Okay. And Ms. Stevens, with you being our own staff HR representative here tonight, do you have any concerns, any suggestions, any comments about this policy?
I mean, I know you already decided, but I would suggest using exceptions based on the amount of questions that we're receiving.
So your suggestion would be to use the enumerated exceptions.
Based on the amount of inquiries we receive right on the person's side.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes, ma'am.
I need to say that. The reason for that, I think it gives examples. And it gives clarification to what not do. That's what stood out to me in this policy. It gives examples of what exceptions could be, with nothing more than clarification.
Okay.
The people get an idea.
Duly noted. Ms. Stevens, anything else from HR's perspective, or y'all probably deal with this more than anybody else in this room, so that's it? Okay. All right, anybody else anything? If not, we'll move on to our next one.
If I could, I wasn't able to hear the additional feedback, Mr. Irwin.
I'm sorry.
I guess wanted to clarify, I guess, 2 things where the committee settled that in terms of, one was that the length or the minimum requirement for posting to remain, was the decision 5 days to extend it to 5 days, because, legally, you don't, it's not really a requirement. If you wanted to move it to 5 days, you wanted to move it to 10 days, you could. It's just, maybe more of an administrative decision, but I wasn't sure if the thought was to increase that number to 5 days or to leave it at 3.
Well, so on that particular issue, I heard Mr. Cunningham suggest 5. Dr. Bagley suggested maybe we leave it at 3, and I don't think Mr. Nixon and I have weighed in one way or the other on it.
Okay. Okay.
So Mr. Nixon says he's good with 3. So what we can do, Mr. Cunningham, just so you know, if we propose it at 3, whenever we have first or second reading, of course, you have the ability during that meeting to suggest that change if you would like to.
Because, it's really up to the employer, it's not a legal requirement. And then the second question that I had, I don't know if I heard Dr. Bagley's feedback or the feedback from HR, but where ultimately did the committee land on the option between identifying any exceptions that would apply when a vacancy would not be posted, or just having the more general?
So technically, I don't think we've landed anywhere yet, because our HR representative and Dr. Bagley both suggested the specific exceptions being listed. So I don't think we've moved past that yet, but we do have Trustee Murdoch is just kind of in the audience, but he has some input. So Mr. Murdoch, what is it that you like?
I just wanted to touch on what Mr. Cunningham was talking about.
Yes, sir.
Most of the time, people that apply for a job already have their resume out. It's ready to go. As soon as they see a job that they're looking for, boom, it's there. So, the 3 days probably would be sufficient. But I just wanted to share that with you, but that's just something that
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Committee members, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Cunningham, having heard the recommendation from HR and from Dr. Bagley about listing the exceptions as opposed to the more general statement that I think we were kind of leaning to earlier, do you guys have an opinion on following their recommendation or still going forward with the general statement?
I'm wondering if you can sort of,
Marry the two together?
yes, and add the line,
Such
such as to the end of that, so that you could do the such as and then the bullets after that, which would give some people an idea.
So just so we're clear with Ms. Jasmine, we're talking about using the paragraph in the middle of page 2. But Ms. Jasmine, you heard us say earlier, to change that to say the administration will generally advertise all job vacancies, including administrative and supervisory. And then I think what I'm hearing from Superintendent Williams and from Board Member Nixon is then at the end of that paragraph, using the line that is the last line on the paragraph on page 1 that says such as principal, assistant principal, et cetera. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then using those listed exceptions. Did I make that confusing enough, Ms. Jasmine?
Well, I think I'm following, so you would go with that first sentence in the highlighted paragraph,
Yes, ma'am.
but we need to specify, you said, such as principal,
Yeah, that's the last line from the other paragraph. They just want that such as in there and then go into the bulleted exceptions that are listed.
okay.
Yep.
And, and it,
Big,
you can always, if there's still, thoughts or different thoughts or feelings about specifying some general language, when it's presented to the board for first reading, you can have the options and, open up the discussion, further to get the entire
Sure.
board's input.
Yes, ma'am.
If there's particular issues that, the committee's not able to agree on, but I'll certainly incorporate these changes.
Okay.
okay.
And then, I guess just going back to the language regarding promotions, was that something that the policy committee felt they wanted to keep in there for the board's consideration and discussion, or is that something that you don't feel is necessary to have?
I personally think that is a good statement just to voice this board's support in promoting from within. Mr. Nixon, Mr. Cunningham?
But I think also maybe get back to, maybe it needs some language just to make it clear though that this is not a statement saying that external candidates will not be given, consideration also, that the district's not limiting promotions only.
Sure, yeah, we just want to make sure, and currently as it's written, there is no qualifier before that consideration. So we just want to make sure that there's nothing there qualifying. For us to say that the board supports internal candidates being promoted is great. We just don't want there to be any kind of qualifier that internal candidates get an unfair advantage or anything. So I think the way it's written is good, I think.
Okay.
Okay? Anyone else, anything? Ms. Jasmine, are there any other clarifying issues on that one?
No,
Okay.
I think that's it. I would just maybe recommend too, maybe between now and when it's submitted for first reading, if HR is able to identify any other, places that,
Possible
ads are
exceptions?
usually posted, besides those listed, that might be helpful as well, if there's some, forums that are missing, that might be some helpful feedback to get and incorporate.
Yep, they're definitely going to work on that, and we will give those suggestions to you as well.
Okay,
Okay?
thanks.
All right, committee members, item 1.03 is policy KF, community use of school facilities. And I don't know, Ms. Jasmine, if this is you or if this is Superintendent Williams. We have, I believe, 3 different versions of this policy. The first one, I'm going to call the clean copy that has no highlights or anything on it. That is our policy as it stands to date. The second one that begins with a green box in the upper right-hand corner of page 1 that says policy KF new draft. Superintendent Williams, if I am not mistaken, that is the one that was proposed from Dr. Wright.
That is correct.
And then Ms. Jasmine, the one with all of the underlining and the strike through is what our legal presented to us. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So committee members, we have those three in front of us for our consideration to go through. Okay. Superintendent Williams, you want to go first?
If I may, if you would just turn your attention to the one that the legal counsel outlined for us. I think that's what we really need to focus our attention on.
Okay.
We will give consideration to the policy that Dr. Wright submitted. As I was talking to legal, the policy that Dr. Wright submitted is more specific and detailed, and we will need to probably have an administrative rule that outlines the fees and the application process and those things. So we will use this one as a general guide as we develop that administrative rule.
Okay.
But to look at general policy, we need to look at the one that our legal counsel has outlined for
Okay.
us. And we need to do the same thing that we did with the other policy. We need to look at it, look at what we like, what we do not like. Is there language, additional language that we need to add? Do we need to take out some things? And I can start the conversation concerning that for your consideration. As I was reading through, I didn't see anything in the policy concerning renting the school facilities as a one-time use, like one-time events. There is a bullet in here, I think it's the fourth bullet that talks about groups that are renting the facility for more than one consecutive month during a 12-month period. And I think that language needs to be in here as well. But I think we do need to, just give consideration to those persons who are just renting it for one time event.
Okay.
I do know there are some organizations that may have a two-day event, that they want to rent the facilities for, and as long as it's not interfering with the regular operations of the school, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
We've also had in the past, Mission Serve, who have used our facilities, over a length of time. And I think, as a community, we need to open our facilities to organizations such as that help others in our community. So that's what I see. that
Okay.
we need to think about.
And I do, board members or committee members, I do just want to bring your attention, and I'm going to be a little intentionally vague, but I think you will understand what I'm talking about. There is a part of this proposed policy from legal that you will remember we are having some discussion of contractual matters in executive session. So I will not go further into that. But there is part of this policy that may be stricken because it may not even be applicable to us anymore. And you'll find out on page 2 of that, okay? So that part, I don't know that we need to spend much time dealing with yet until the board does what it needs to do in executive session. But the rest of this policy, Ms. Jasmine and Ms. Allison have stricken through a lot and given us a good recommendation here. So I will be more than open to hearing whatever your comments or suggestions are on policy.
And if I could say this, Dr. Wright did a lot of work too in what he has presented. It's very detailed and a lot of good and valuable language for utilizing an administrative rule. Because you want your policy that kind of just has the bare bones, and then you want that administrative rule to have all the procedures, the costs, the fees that are going to be implemented, the process that will take place, what applicants are required to produce when they, ask to use the facilities. So, I think it might be helpful just for this general discussion is, tell us what's in this bare bone policy that you know, don't like or what you like. And then based on that, I think it would be helpful just going back with the administration and getting some additional information and then trying to merge or marry, you know, what Dr. Wright has presented in this policy and then come before the committee with not only a policy but a detailed rule that incorporates kind of everything that you're looking at. If there's a way to kind of marry and merge this information into, you know, rule and administrative, policy and administrative rule, and then exhibits, that might be, you know, the most effective way. But I think a good start is at least looking at the bare bone policy and, you know, if there's some things in here that you just don't like, you want to take out, you know, let us know. We can take those out. If there's things that you like, we'll put a check by that and then build on that in the administrative rule, which will have more details.
I guess one of my questions on what you, the attorneys, have submitted, I don't know whether you work on it or not, but the attorneys, it says clearly that school-sponsored programs, clubs, organizations take precedence over all other users. And my question is, if someone books the playground at some school for a function of a family reunion, if I book it in February, but then a school program comes along in April and wants that same date, do then I lose that date because of it being a school organization? Since school functions or school organizations take precedence over others. And so that's my question, because if I book it 2 months in advance and they come along 2 months later and just kick me out, how does that serve me?
That's a very good question, Mr. Nixon. However, generally, you know, whoever books the facility first will usually be the organization that we need to use it. So we usually do that in reverse. So if you are wanting to book a facility for a family reunion, and the school has already booked it for that date, then you won't have an opportunity to use it. But if you book it first, normally we will honor your booking because you booked it in February, whereas the school didn't. Unless it's an extreme, I can't think of any extreme cases where we have not honored the booking of a community organization that's already had it in the books. Generally try to do that because, you know, we're working with the community and we want to be a service to our community as well. But we also, you know, the way it's written, I think we probably need to take a look at that. I understand what you're saying, but generally we honor those requests.
Superintendent Williams, who makes the
And
decision?
also that language is put in there too, just to kind of from the outset to make it clear that, okay, the district has property and, you know, the priority obviously is going to be, you know, the use of the facilities for a school. You know, that this is kind of what, you know, from the outset takes precedent. And then, you know, that, I think as Ms. Williams explained, when you have conflicts, you can certainly work through those. It wouldn't mean that somebody would necessarily lose their reservation. But I think that language is there just so from the outset it's understood that you know, the needs of you know, the school and will take precedent. Obviously, if somebody wants to use the property that, you know, it's needed for some other school-related activity, that they're going to get the benefit from the outset. But once a reservation has been made, I think defer to how, you know, what Ms. Williams said, how that would be handled. But yeah, that is something that you can certainly clarify or address in your administrative rule.
Because whoever's making the decision on approving the rental, hopefully, is verifying with the school, hey, we have this request for this date. That way the school is aware of it and able to look ahead to say, might we have a program or something. I would think once we, and whoever we from the district approves that reservation, I would think that reservation would then take precedence over anything else that's planned after that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Allen, I mean, you probably get the same page or policy KF, communities of school facility. They say school buildings are available to church group, worship service. I'm looking at saying that the church must provide documents why the church is getting renovated or something. Do we have to bring documents to show that the church is getting work done on it? Is that something that is the law that we have to do this? We have to show that?
Did you hear that, Ms. Chapman?
I think you're talking about a provision that would allow a church to utilize the district's facilities when they're in the process of building one.
Right, and I'm looking at saying, you have to have documents showing that your church is getting something done so that getting work done on it.
The policy right now says they have to submit that documentation proving. I think Mr. Cunningham's question is, do we have to have that in there saying that they have to prove the?
I think that's something to be.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Was the question, do you need that provision in your policy to allow churches to utilize?
No, ma'am. I think this question was under that, allowing church groups to use the facility. Do we have to have the wording that says they have to produce documentation showing their instruction or whatever?
That's an administrative decision. I think it's put in there so that obviously it's very clear. I think it just helps everybody here on the same page and there's no questions. I think it benefits the district obviously just to have that documentation. Legally, is it required? I would say no. It's more just to benefit the district.
And I would just throw this out there to our policy committee as we're kind of looking at this, and we're going to have to wrap up because we have this other meeting coming up. Anytime we talk about a freedom or a right to do something, it goes for everybody. So just because, and we'll just use religion, right? Just because you would like for this particular denomination church to be able to use your facility, but you may not like this other denomination to be able to use your facility. Whenever you make the right available, you make it available to everybody, whether you agree with them or not. So some of these things, some of the more specifics, I think, like Ms. Jasmine said, give you more of a legal footing of being able to allow or disallow certain things. So I just think as we kind of look at that, we need to make sure that we're looking at the overarching thing, right? Do we have the protection? Because you can't, if you're going to open it up for everybody, then it's open for everybody as long as they meet the terms of this. And that may mean sometimes that your facilities are being used by groups that you personally would not approve of or won't use the facilities. So we just need to kind of think of that as we're working through this policy. Ms. Jasmine, we need to wrap up just because we have this budget work session. So let me ask you a question real quick. We need to work on this administrative rule. Would it be advisable for us as the policy committee to go ahead and offer the proposed language that legal has sent us for first reading, or do we need to hold off on even the first reading until we gather this administrative rule and get that hammered out?
I think I would hold off on the first reading until the policy committee, either approves, this proposed language. I mean, if you said today, we're comfortable with this proposed language, it could go forward and we could always work on a rule later, but it would probably be most beneficial to have that conversation with the administration where, we're going back with the feedback we got today, and we're coming forward with something that meets the needs and desires of the policy committee to present to the board.
Okay.
But it does, I know we time did not permit to get through this entire policy, so I don't know today if the policy committee likes what's proposed or not. So I don't know if you'd be in a position to present it to the board without having the support of the policy committee.
So here's what I'm going to suggest, committee members, and you tell me if you're in agreement with this. Let's go ahead and propose policy GCEC on the posting and advertising of professional vacancies. We will propose that to the board for first reading. Let's hold off on policy KF, and then have our next policy committee meeting. And I understand that part of the reason why we're dealing with policy KF is because there are some issues that are needed in this policy now. So let's get together and see if we can't go ahead and get another policy committee scheduled, and we will start with this policy KF at that next meeting. That will give all three of us a chance to make sure we're comfortable with the proposed language, and that will give us an opportunity to get with Superintendent Williams and the administration, so we can go ahead and get a head start on that administrative rule too, before we present that. Is everybody in agreement with that? Mr. Cunningham, we can go with that? Okay, Superintendent Williams, do you have anything else in closing?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in addition to that, the administration would like to get together with legal to kind of talk about some of those changes to KF that we talked about tonight.
Okay.
To present back to the policy for further discussion.
Okay, that'd be great. Ms. Jasmine, is there anything else from your point?
No,
Okay, well,
nothing else to add.
we thank you very much for your time, and I don't know if you're staying with us or not, but we're ending our policy committee meeting, so we will bid you adieu. That way you don't bill us for the time in between. Thank you very much, Ms. Jasmine. I appreciate it.
Thank
Policy
you.
committee, thank you, and we will get together here shortly and try to determine another date and time so we can go ahead and get another meeting scheduled. All right.
Okay.
Anybody else? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.